losers in this situation.
The problem for him there is damages, right? So even if like somehow they manage to come back in his favor, if they don't think that he suffered any damages as a result of her op-ed and that he didn't get any work because of his own behavior, then he's going to lose.
And lastly, he did get up there when he said his final thoughts last week. He said, I just wanted my truth to come out. I wanted to set the record straight. So at the end of the day, no matter what happens, I think Johnny just wanted this moment to kind of say what he wanted to say. And I would assume he's probably happy with the outcome no matter what, because of all of the attention he has gotten in all of these moments to speak out in a way that is just unfathomable, especially with all of the media attention and everything on social media.
Chloe Melas, Laura Jarrett, thank you both.
Sure.
Thank you.
New Day continues right now.
Good morning to viewers here in the U.S. and around the world. It is Tuesday, May 31st, and I'm Brianna Keeler with John Berman. America has seen 17 more mass shootings since 19 children and 2 teachers were killed in one of the nation's deadliest school shootings last week. In those other shootings, 13 people were killed. Dozens more were injured. This is according to the Gun Violence Archive, which defines a mass shooting as 4 or more people being shot or killed, not including the shooter.
New this morning, CNN has obtained video from a Facebook live stream during the Uvalde shooting of a frantic radio call. Listen to this.
Are you injured?
Oh my God!
Where?
A kid got shot.
They shot a kid?
Now, although the voice does sound like that of a child, it's not clear if it was a student, a teacher, or law enforcement officer. The man who recorded this says the audio came from the radio in a Customs and Border Protection vehicle outside the school. Happening today, a bipartisan group of senators will meet virtually to discuss gun safety legislation. The last time lawmakers enacted a major piece of gun legislation was the 1994 assault weapons ban, which expired in 2004 after lawmakers chose not to renew it. Here with the impact that federal ban might have had, CNN's Tom Foreman. Tom.
Hey, John. You know, when we talk about assault weapons or assault rifles, let's talk about what we mean to begin with. Generally, we're talking about semi-automatic firing, meaning every time you pull the trigger, you don't have to do anything, just pull, 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 shoot, shoot, shoot. A detachable and possibly a large capacity magazine to carry a lot of bullets in there. A pistol grip or something else that allows better control of this, so with all that shooting, it doesn't sort of walk away from the target. That's literally what this is all about. And as the Johns Hopkins Center for Gun Violence reports, shootings involving these weapons often result in more shots fired, more people wounded, and more wounds per victim compared to attacks with other firearms. That's why people are so concerned about the assault weapons ban. They're saying these are the guns that people choose when they want these big scale attacks in many ways. And if you look at the numbers from the same center, from Johns Hopkins Center, you can see what happened. Before the ban, pre-1994, this was the level of different assaults. This is like a pistol using a large magazine, and this is assault. And during the ban, almost nothing. And then after the ban, from 2004 on, look at the giant growth here. Tricky, you have to bear in mind, as big as these numbers are over this period of time, these are small numbers, so it's sort of hard to put together exactly the impact, but advocates for gun control look at this and say it's obvious a ban on assault weapons would make a difference. Now, since the federal ban dropped, different states have taken different approaches to this. Some states, the darker blue states, have more restrictive gun laws, and they will make the case that they believe per capita that they're doing better for having done this. The bottom line, though, is in terms of mass shootings, yeah, we've had some really huge ones in the years since the ban was dropped. In Las Vegas, 58 killed at the concert there. The Sutherland Springs, that church service, 26 killed. The Pulse nightclub down in Florida, 49 killed. Sandy Hook School, of course, 26 killed. The bottom line, John, is when you look at the number of deaths in this country, handguns still far and away are the leader. That's what causes most deaths by gun in this country, even if you remove suicides from the equation. But assault weapons, because they seem so uniquely attractive to mass shooters, people who want to create chaos and carnage. That's why many of these advocates are saying, go after these assault weapons, because they do not see the practical use for these that many gun enthusiasts do see. And they're saying, this is low-hanging fruit. Let's get those either off the market or severely restricted, and then talk about what else might need to be done. John?
Tom Foreman, thanks for laying it out for us. Really appreciate it.
Although there has been a years-long stalemate in Washington when it comes to gun reform, President Biden is now expressing optimism.
I think there's a realization on the part of rational Republicans, and I consider McConnell a rational Republican, and Cornyn is as well. I think there's a recognition on their part that we can't continue like this.
With us now is Jackie Kucinich, CNN political analyst and Washington bureau chief at the Daily Beast. She has covered the issue of these mass shootings and gun policy in earnest for almost a decade now after Sandy Hook, which is why we have you here to talk about this today. Is he being naive?
I think optimism is the right word here, but it does seem like Joe Biden is still assuming that the Senate that he left is still the Senate that is there, in which case you had Republicans that were more willing to work across the aisle with Democrats, but particularly on the issue of guns and even gun safety for that matter, because we've seen background check bills go down in flames for a number of reasons. It's tough. It's tough in the U.S. Senate, and it is really going to be very hard to move anything. So in that way, perhaps.
So what is the role of Mitch McConnell and John Cornyn in this?
So what Mitch McConnell has tapped John Cornyn to, be the listener, be the negotiator for Republicans on what could potentially be get through the Senate, perhaps have bipartisan support. But we're talking about things that aren't going to. We're not talking about an assault weapons ban. Far, 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 far from it. We're talking about potentially the Manchin-Toomey bill, which went through the legislative process right after Sandy Hook, and that, of course, failed. But all that did was add it took private sales and made it so you would have to have a background check. But it took family members out of the equation. You wouldn't have to do it if you're exchanging between family members. And there were some other small provisions, but even that was too much to get through the U.S. Senate, and that was right after Sandy Hook. I think timing also really matters here. The sense of urgency, the closer it is to these events happening, the more likely something is going to get passed. The farther and farther away, you'll see particularly Republicans start peeling off and finding reasons why they don't have to support something like this. And that is just something we've seen happen over and over and over again as these mass shootings happen.
It's easy when we cover this in Washington to get cynical that it's anything other than movement theater. I realize sometimes as people watch that they can feel hopeless looking at that. I don't want them to. I just sometimes wonder if, as they're looking for hope that things may actually shift in this, if looking at elected leaders is where they're actually going to find hope that things can change.
Well, so elected, I think, is the key word there, because right now, or at least even before Sandy Hook, there really wasn't any political incentive, particularly for Republicans, to move forward on this. And even for Democrats, I mean, look what happened after a lot of Democrats who lost in the aftermath of voting for the first assault weapons ban looked at that vote as something that perhaps made them lose the House in the mid-90s. But now if people out there want to see more gun regulations, they have to look at who they're voting for and look at their elected leaders, because at this point it looks like in November is probably where this is going to be judged, rather than right in the here and now. And within the last 10 years, you've seen more of the pro-gun safety movement build up a political incentive to back up people who do take these votes as a counter to groups like the NRA, who do really fight against tooth and nail against any regulations being implemented. So political incentive, very much a part of this, even though there is a moral imperative.
Thank you, Jackie. Always such a good temperature check for telling us where things really stand on this. We appreciate it.
So at the request of Uvalde's mayor, the Department of Justice will review the law enforcement response at the Robb Elementary School. Joining me now, former Attorney General under President George W. Bush, Alberto Gonzales. He is currently the Dean at the Belmont University College of Law. It's always great to have you on, sir. Thank you so much for being with us. This Justice Department review, What do you think the most important thing for them to focus on is, and what do you expect might come from it?
Well, I think the timeline, fully understanding what actually happened here. There are conflicting stories. Obviously, as time goes by, we get more and more information. But I think that's the main thing, because without truly understanding what happened, it's hard to come up with recommendations about how to prevent something like this from happening again. So that's going to be the main thing, is just getting all the information related to this particular shooting.
Broadly speaking, there is general agreement in law enforcement communities that you can't wait during a mass shooting, that law enforcement needs to go in quickly and powerfully. The issue is making that something that is palatable, or having law enforcement realize they have to make that choice in that moment. I mean, how do you do that?
Well, that comes from training, quite frankly, John. A lot of training and leadership. You're right. It's difficult. It's easy to second guess after the fact in terms of what was the right decision here. It appears that the wrong decision was made, and the prevailing wisdom, and this has changed over time in terms of how best to respond to this kind of situation. But the prevailing wisdom is that you go in quickly, as soon as you can, to save as many lives as possible. Obviously, there was uncertainty about the situation within those classrooms, and that caused a hesitation. But that's going to be the job of the Department of Justice, is to ascertain what really happened here. And of course, and then they'll make recommendations. Yeah, I was the Attorney General during the time of the Virginia Tech shootings. We lost, I think, over 30 people. And part of my responsibility was to work with the Secretary of Education, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and try to understand what happened at Virginia Tech and come up with a list of recommendations that would hopefully prevent those kinds of incidents from happening again. Obviously, they continue, and so more work needs to be done. I applaud Senator McConnell, Senator Cornyn, in terms of looking at this, having a discussion about this. I think it is important. I think Congress can be very, very helpful. This is not about ending gun ownership. It's about expanding gun safety. I grew up in Texas. I live in Tennessee, two very red states. Gun ownership is very, very important. But I think if you talk to most people in the red states, even, they'll tell you that what they really support is responsible gun ownership. And that's what we are looking to have our congressional leadership provide for us.
I was just speaking with Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson, who I know you worked with in the Bush White House. And I'm not sure he supports raising the age to buy an AR-15 style weapon yet, but he did immediately say he wants to have the discussion about raising the age to buy such a weapon. What do you think about that?
I don't think a complete ban is politically viable, quite frankly. I do think we could possibly get the age raised to 21. That seems to make sense. But I think there are other things, and I think Governor Hutchinson was willing to explore these other things that might be done. For example, expanding background checks, perhaps encouraging states to have more states to have red flag laws. There are a number of things that can occur. For example, one of the things we discovered after Virginia Tech was how little mental health information was being shared by the states to the national database. And so there's more coordination that's necessary between state and federal officials in order to improve gun safety here in America.
You don't think, for instance, as often we hear from some people, the Second Amendment isn't absolute in the sense that there can be no regulation on firearms?
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely disagree with the notion that the Second Amendment is unlimited. The Supreme Court has already issued decisions indicating that reasonable restrictions are constitutional. So those who say that any kind of regulation is an infringement upon my constitutional rights, they're just making a political statement.
Any other possibilities? High-capacity magazines, for instance, is an area where some people would like to see some kind of regulation.
Well, I think in the area of they are AR-15. These are killing machines, and so I think it's possible we might get some movement there. But again, a complete ban, I quite frankly think politically it's not viable. You also, no matter what we do here with respect to assault weapons or any other kind of weapon, you have millions of these weapons already in the hands of gun owners in this country. So there are limitations. I think what we ought to focus on is what is possible, what is really possible, as opposed to going for something that has no absolutely no chance of being passed into law.
I'm actually a little surprised that you just used the phrase killing machine, because that's something that people who do want to see a ban on AR-15s, that's a phrase that they use. And you were, I believe, still White House counsel in 2004 when the assault weapons ban expired, which was something the Bush White House, if I'm not mistaken, wanted to see expire. Do you regret at this point that the 1994 assault weapon ban expired?
Well, again, again, because there are millions already in the hands of gun owners, that doesn't mean that it would have eliminated or stopped a mass shooting. Quite frankly, personally, I have no issue with respect to bans on assault weapons. But I again, John, I just don't think it's possible here in this country at this particular point in time. I don't know what it would take to get that passed, but as I look at the makeup of the members of the Senate and members of the House, I just don't see it happening. Just don't see it's possible.
Former Attorney General Alberto Gonzales, as I said, always a pleasure to speak with you. Thanks for coming on this morning.
Thanks, John.
Why President Biden says he will not send Ukraine rockets that could reach deep into Russian territory.
Plus, new and exclusive CNN reporting this morning on the escalated search for the source of the Roe v. Wade leak. And a former Trump White House advisor revealing he's been subpoenaed by federal prosecutors.
To open doors, to develop contacts, and to unlock secrets, it takes trust.
It was the first time he really came out of his shell in front of a camera.
Trust that you'll listen,
So great that you're here today. It just highlights what's making a difference.
that you'll be honest. I don't want to pry, but what sort of conversations do you have with them? Trust that you'll be accurate and you'll be fair. It was an unprecedented move, very eerie. All the roads have been closed off. Describe the scene that you arrived to. The Apache attack helicopter. This is what Captain Wales has been flying. Do you want talks with them?
What is the point of talking now?
Huge amounts of police support coming into this protest. We continue to monitor the government in crisis. This was the Duchess's first news interview. Rare access indeed. That's what it's all about. Max Foster, CNN.
The world is changing, the industry's changing, the windows are changing, things going to streaming are changing. And I think if you're a company that just sits around and says, I'm going to do things the same way I've done them for the past 20 years, you're going to be left in the dust. So IMAX has been looking to move into other areas. We did a live stream with Kanye and Drake, and that was really successful. People dancing in the theaters. We also, in a related way, did a deal with Disney Plus, where we're now on that service.
We have front row seats.
And for a number of the big Marvel titles, you could see them with IMAX aspect ratio. So the core movie business is doing extremely well. I think we have to lead the way to a transition to the new world and look at new ways of doing things.
Connect the World with Becky Anderson.
It all starts here. Changing, fighting, creating, connecting. That's why we're here. We live here, we work here, we're from here, and we'll go wherever the story takes us.
I'm Becky Anderson in Tehran.
We are in Jerusalem. Real news that shapes our world. Exploring not just what's going on, but why. I just want to press you on one further point. Getting perspective on this region from this region. Places that many of us know, but few of us get to see. Observing countries on the move, still rooted in tradition. It all starts here, and that's why we're here, bringing you the world from our Middle Eastern hub.
Connect the World with Becky Anderson, today on CNN.
I'm Chumana Karachi in Istanbul, and this is CNN.
Pope Francis elevating a progressive bishop to cardinal, raising questions about what kind of clergy he would like to see in the United States. CNN has reporters around the world covering all the latest.
I'm Delia Gallagher in Rome. The United States has a new cardinal. Pope Francis has named San Diego Bishop Robert McElroy, the only American, as one of 21 new cardinals to be installed August 27th in a ceremony at the Vatican. McElroy is known as a progressive, a friend of the LGBTQ community, and against denying communion to pro-choice politicians.
I'm Hadass Gold in Jerusalem, where there are growing calls to outlaw two extremist Jewish groups after Sunday's Jerusalem Day flag march turned violent. The march commemorates when Israel took control of East Jerusalem from Jordan in 1967, but has become a magnet for far-right groups. And on Sunday, marchers violently clashed with Palestinians in the Old City streets, some even shouting hateful chants like "Death to Arabs." While Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett has condemned what he called a minority, two of his cabinet ministers have gone even further. The defense minister and the public security minister say two specific extremist groups, known as Lehava and La Familia, should be designated as terrorist organizations, effectively outlawing them.
I am Stefano Pozzebon in Bogota, and Colombia took a new step towards the unknown last Sunday as two outsiders progressed to the second round of the country's presidential election. For the runoff, which is set for June 19th, third-time candidate and left-wing former guerrilla member Gustavo Petro will face off a 77-year-old populist entrepreneur Rodolfo Hernandez. Petro, who won the first round with 40% of the ballots, said Colombia was ready to open a new chapter in its recent history.
I'm Christy Lustout in Hong Kong. A U.S. congressional delegation led by Senator Tammy Duckworth is in Taiwan for an unannounced three-day visit. On Tuesday morning, they met with Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen, and they stressed the importance of the U.S.-Taiwan partnership on security as well as economic collaboration. Now, China slammed the visit, with its embassy in Washington saying it firmly opposes it and that the U.S. should, quote, stop all forms of official interactions with Taiwan.
Since the beginning of Russia's war on Ukraine, the U.S. has had to navigate wanting to help Ukraine's military without going so far as to provoke Russia into war. President Biden making that clear.
Are you going to send long-range rocket systems to Ukraine?
We're not going to send to Ukraine rocket systems that can strike into Russia.
CNN reported last week that the Biden administration was preparing to step up the kind of weaponry it is offering Ukraine by sending advanced long-range rocket systems. Russia warned the U.S. will, quote, cross a red line if those supplies are sent. Joining us now is CNN White House reporter Natasha Bertrand and CNN national security correspondent Kylie Atwood. Okay, so tell us how, if President Biden's comments change any of that, Natasha.
So the short answer is they don't change much, because what we had heard from sources last week was that the administration was preparing to announce that they would be sending these systems, these multiple launch rocket systems to Ukraine that the Ukrainians had been essentially begging for the last several weeks. The nuance, though, here is that while those systems can fire as far as 300 kilometers, so that's about 186 miles, it depends on the kind of munition that's actually in the system. So the administration could send rockets that don't go as far. And that would then allow the Biden administration to say, look, we are providing these systems to the Ukrainians. However, we're not giving them the kinds of ammunition, the kind of rockets that would then allow them to strike 200 miles across the border into Russia, for example, because Russia has said that any kind of Western facilitation of Ukrainian attacks on Russian soil would, in fact, be a red line.
Is Russia going to see it that way, do you think, Kylie?
Well, I think that's the question here, and that has always been the question that the Biden administration looks at when they're deciding when they're going to increase the weaponry that they send to the Ukrainians. And so we've seen this debate play out constantly over the last 4 months, right? But you have seen the Biden administration with a higher risk tolerance in terms of
what weaponry they're willing to give Ukraine over the last few months. And so it does matter how Russia responds here. And it's significant that after Natasha and our colleagues reported that these multiple launch rocket systems were being considered, a Russian TV host came out and said, this is a red line for Russia. Now, a TV host isn't the same as the Kremlin saying that, but you have to imagine that the Biden administration is digesting all of these comments that are coming out of Russia and putting that into part of its calculation here.
We should be clear, all these missile strikes that you see the video of, the terrible effect of in Ukraine, these are missiles that are coming from outside of Ukraine. They're coming from Belarus, they're coming from Russia, and Ukraine wants this ability to hit those. Will they have that ability?
Well, this is exactly why they want these systems, right? They say that this could be a game changer, that if they get these systems from the United States and from the U.S. allies, including the UK, which is also considering sending them, then they could effectively break the Russian siege tactics in areas of eastern Ukraine, and they could fire back and hit areas where those missile strikes are coming from. But the real kind of purpose and real kind of usefulness of these systems would in fact be to push the Russians back. So if the Russians know that they have these systems that are capable of striking miles and miles out, then the idea is that the Russians will then back away. And so this isn't necessarily useful only for the purpose of striking locations inside Russia or Belarus or whatever. It is also for defensive purposes. And that is why we also saw, of course, Denmark is sending Harpoon anti-cruise, anti-ship missiles to the Ukrainians so that they can start striking those ships that are in the Black Sea that are also striking Ukrainian targets.
So, yeah, go on.
Yeah, and I just want to add that because the technical details matter here, we were talking about earlier, the United States has already given Ukraine these howitzers that go 18 miles in distance. So we are talking about a much greater distance that they are now considering, but it's not as if the Ukrainians don't have the capability to be launching rockets that are going a significant distance and are already giving them some capability. They just want to be able to go further now.
And not ruling out that they will be able to go further.
Yeah.
Maybe just not incredibly far is the issue here. Kylie, Natasha, great reporting. Thank you guys so much. Turn over phone records, sign affidavits, exclusive CNN reporting on this ramped up search for who leaked the Roe v. Wade draft opinion.
Back into the danger zone, decades after the tragic and mysterious death of Goose. Top Gun blasts into theaters with huge success. What's the key to this magic? How will Hollywood try to copy this going forward?
20,000 naira for free. 20,000 naira bonus. Is your line blocked? Then move to Glow.
I'm reconnected.
Because we've all reconnected. And it's simple, simple. Dial *109# and link your NIN to your new or existing Glow number. Get up to 20,000 naira for free with Glow.
20,000 naira bonus free.
Yes, sir, free.
Nigel, what are you waiting for?
South Africa.
Sunny day in Cape Town, and today
We invite you with open arms to our wonderful country.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
I'm Bianca Noblo in London, and this is CNN.
New this morning, an exclusive to CNN, Supreme Court officials escalating their search for the source of the leaked draft decision that would overturn Roe versus Wade. Let's get right to CNN's Joan Preskupik with this exclusive reporting. Joan, what have you learned?
Well, they're certainly ramping up this search for who would have leaked this document to Politico. It's been 4 weeks now since Chief Justice John Roberts announced that he was launching an investigation. Apparently, insufficient progress has been made, so they're now turning to the clerks, stepping up efforts to have them sign affidavits and to turn over cell phone records. This is a very aggressive move, and it's raised some concerns among the clerks. You know, John, how much information is on our cell phones, and we don't know if they're just asking for calls or texts and images, but it does show how seriously the court is taking this, and also how concerned it is about this breach and possible other disclosures over the next 4 weeks as the justices wrap up this term. Now, already, this all happened in the most important case of this term, if not the most important case of decades, that one that would roll back a half century of abortion rights and privacy protections. And one thing to know, that as much as this draft has sort of shocked the country in both directions, you know, people very happy with the direction that the court might be taking, and those who are just very much disturbed, it's very much disrupted negotiations inside the court. This draft was dated in February, and the justices themselves are still trying to still working on potential compromises or maybe strengthening this draft. So it's disruptive. The leak, the disclosure by Politico just a little bit over 4 weeks ago, has just so rattled people inside and out. And apparently, they have made insufficient progress to figure out how this happened, that they're now taking this dramatic step, John.
Cell phone records and affidavits. Joan Preskupik, thank you so much for this exclusive reporting. Appreciate it. Sure. Joining us now, Chief Legal Analyst Jeffrey Toobin. Jeffrey, what about this? Have you ever seen anything like this?
I mean, zero, nothing like this. I mean, the Supreme Court has been an institution that prizes its secrecy, has preserved its secrecy, and now they are doing apparently a serious investigation. I think it's important to point out this is not a criminal investigation. It is basically an employment situation where all these clerks are in danger of being fired, or anyone else is in danger of being fired if they leaked it. But I don't think there is any criminal dimension to this. And these are not grand jury subpoenas. These are simply requests to the clerks. But as in employment situations, if you don't agree, you can be fired. So you can understand why the clerks are freaking out here.
They are. Many of them are considering lawyering up for this situation. Jeffrey, another development overnight I want to ask you about, because it's potentially significant, which is Peter Navarro, former White House advisor under former President Trump, has put out a statement saying that he has received a grand jury subpoena to testify about events surrounding January 6th. What's the significance of this?
Well, again, Peter Navarro is an eccentric character, and until we see the subpoena, or until a lawyer has seen the subpoena, he says he's representing himself. We can't know exactly what's going on here, but potentially why it's so significant is that the Justice Department's January 6th investigation has been almost entirely focused on the people physically inside the Capitol, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, that side of the insurrection. What the Justice Department has not done so far as we know, is investigate the president and the people around him and whether they instigated the insurrection. If, in fact, this is a grand jury subpoena for Peter Navarro to talk about what was going on in and around the White House on January 6th, that would be a significant expansion of this investigation, and one that gets much closer to President Trump.
He's a forward-facing, very public White House advisor called to testify potentially about the substance surrounding January 6th, which is something we haven't exactly seen before, at least not named before, Jeffrey. We know that Navarro wrapped up in potential contempt referrals having to do with the House investigation, but this feels different than that.
It seems to be different from that. And again, until we see the subpoena, until other people can analyze what exactly was done with Navarro, we can't know for sure. But I mean, it is potentially very significant because there's been a tremendous amount of frustration among people who are still angry about what happened to January 6th. That the Justice Department's investigation has seemed to be very limited, only to the people physically inside the Capitol or those directly connected to them. The issue of did the president and did the people around the president violate the law by trying to overturn the election? That, as far as we know, has not been investigated by the Justice Department so far. But if this subpoena is what it appears to be, that would signal a significant expansion of the Justice Department investigation. We should know more if Peter Navarro files this lawsuit he claims to be wanting to file. He would certainly attach the subpoena as an exhibit to that lawsuit. He says he's going to file it today, so we should know more today about what the Justice Department actually tried to do.
Watch this space. Jeffrey Toobin, thank you so much for being with us this morning. Former President Trump turning his attention to the Wyoming primary and attempting to take out a political rival, while one former Republican leader there says his party has been hijacked.
Plus, we're breaking down the timeline minute by minute of 911 calls made by students during the Uvalde mass shooting and the police response.
South Africa. Sunny day in Cape Town, and today
We invite you with open arms to our wonderful country.
₦20,000 for free. 20,000 naira bonus.
Is your line blocked? Then move to Glow. I'm reconnected.
Because we've all reconnected. And it's simple, simple. Dial *109# and link your NIN to your new or existing Glow number. Get up to 20,000 naira for free with Glow.
20,000 naira bonus free.
Yes, sir, free.
Nigel, what are you waiting for?
Inside Africa Fact File, in association with Zenith Bank.
Coronavirus. To get daily news updates in your inbox, sign up for the CNN newsletter. Coronavirus. Fact versus fiction.
You can help the refugees from Ukraine. Join the over 80,000 who've already raised millions for food, shelter, and more. Explore CNN.com/impact. Click to take action.
So many questions about what is the federal government doing. Do you get the anger that is out here?
How concerned are you about the front line?
You don't believe that there's a racial divide here?
Looking back, as president, did you tell the story of race in America enough, do you think?
All the places I've been and all the things I've seen, all the people I've talked to, I carry with me. They're a part of what I do right here, holding the powerful accountable, keeping them honest.
AC 360, Tuesday through Saturday only on CNN.
Afghan women are afraid that this is the beginning of your efforts to erase them from the workspace.
Malumnis, it's not clear. Even if we appear with the burqa, maybe they will say that women's voices are forbidden.
Did you ever imagine that you would be prevented from going to school?
Girls' education is fundamental to the dignity of Afghan life.
Do you believe that young girls will be allowed to go to school here in Afghanistan?
This morning, we're getting Republican response out of Wyoming as former President Trump takes aim at Liz Cheney, who is fighting to keep her House seat there. Trump is backing Cheney's primary challenger after Cheney turned from supporter to critic following the 2020 presidential election and attempts to overturn it.
There is no rhino in America who has thrown in her lot with the radical left more than Liz Cheney. And it's why in 2 months from now, the people of Wyoming are going to tell her, Liz, you're fired. Get out of here. Get out of here. I think this is the most important election that we have right here.
Joining us now is Dr. Joseph McGinley. He is the former chairman of the Natrona County Republican Party. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. I do wonder what you think about this election. First and foremost, is it the most important election as Trump describes it?
Hey, good morning, Brianna. Every election is important. Here in Wyoming, we have a single House representative. So for the people of Wyoming, this is important. Maybe not for the reasons President Trump stresses, but for us here in Wyoming, yes, this election is important.
What's your reaction to how he's targeting her?
Well, it's unfortunate. Here in Wyoming, we don't need to be told how to vote. We can look at the voting record of Representative Cheney. We can see that, she represents us very well. She has for the past several years. Having individuals come in from out of state endorsing candidates, it's great for the opponent, that's for sure. But I don't think it'll influence many voters here within the state.
He calls her a rhino. What do you think about that? What do you think more broadly people in Wyoming think about that?
Well, first of all, the name calling is unnecessary. Secondly, I don't know how you call one of the most conservative voting individuals within the House of Representatives. I don't know how you call them a rhino. That's the problem with this name calling and the back and forth. There's a proven record here. There's facts. If you look at how Representative Cheney has voted, she's voted in line with President Trump for many years. For the people of Wyoming, those values are conservative values. Calling someone a rhino, calling someone names, that doesn't help. That doesn't really move the conversation forward.
You saw the rally. He has many fans. Is she in jeopardy?
Well, I don't know. It's going to be a challenging election, that's for sure. Her opponent definitely needed the endorsement of President Trump to be competitive. But, we're in Wyoming. Representative Cheney, her family, well-respected, obviously Vice President Cheney from Wyoming. As I said before, I would never bet against a Cheney in Wyoming, mostly because there's a proven record, there's proven facts on this one. The rally was great. It was, good turnout for Casper. But that doesn't define the election. That doesn't define the outcome of what we're going to see at the polls come August.
I do want to ask you about the approach that she's taken. We saw in Georgia, for instance, Governor Kemp, he kind of ignored Trump. It worked for him. Did Cheney take the right approach here? Or it was a different one?
Well, her campaign, if you look at her campaign, she's not focusing on President Trump. She's focusing on her job. She's focusing on what it means to be Republican. We're the party of Reagan. We're the party of Lincoln. We're the party of the Constitution. And that's what Representative Cheney's campaign is focusing on. She absolutely does not shy away from the question regarding January 6th and President Trump. But it's definitely not the sole focus of the campaign and her election.
Dr. McGinley, we always appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
Heart-pounding video showing a group of young people narrowly dodging a coming train.
Nothing to smile about. The Mona Lisa caked in an apparent act of protest. And the Top Gun sequel. Does it do justice to the legacy of Goose?
And we're off.
Even as it shatters box office records. What this tells us about how to achieve success at movie theaters now.
We're going into combat.
Forced labor looks different in different countries and different sectors. My name is Jonas Astrup. I'm the Chief Technical Advisor for the ILO Third-Party Monitoring Project in Uzbekistan. And I've been based in Tashkent for the last 4 years. Uzbekistan is the 6th largest producer of cotton in the world, but the cotton harvest in Uzbekistan is the world's largest recruitment effort, with approximately 2 million people picking cotton every year from September to November. And ILO has been monitoring the cotton harvest in Uzbekistan for child labor since 2013 and for child labor and forced labor since 2015 under an agreement with the World Bank. We have witnessed incredible changes during that time. 2 million children out of child labor and 500,000 adults out of forced labor. We have seen wages increased by over 600%. We have seen the number of labor inspectors doubled and perpetrators punished. Forced labor and child labor is now a criminal offense in Uzbekistan. We've seen awareness raising campaigns to make sure that people are aware of their rights, and we have seen a liberalization and a privatization of the agricultural system. There's still work to do in Uzbekistan, but I think it's fair to say that Uzbekistan is a success story in the world of work.
For World Sport, I'm Amanda Davis, and this is CNN.
Here we go. In 3, 2, 1.
Top Gun Maverick, topping the Memorial Day weekend box office. According to Paramount, the film's distributor, it is on track to be the highest opening ever for Memorial Day weekend.
And so it should be, I say. So far, 55% of the U.S. box office totals are coming from ticket holders over the age of 35, pointing to a need for nostalgia. Joining us now is CNN media analyst Bill Carter. What do you think about this, Bill?
Well, you know, I think it proves a lot of things. I think it proves that if you get the big star with this, you know, pre-sold premise, it's a sequel, obviously people know the characters, and you give them real incredible thrills that they can't get, you know, watching a movie on their, you know, little screen at home on their couch, and you tell a really good story that really works, you can really still bring people into the theater. I think people do like that experience when the product demands it. And in this case, the product demanded it.
They waited 2 years, more than 2 years, to release this, Bill. I mean, it does indicate that they knew what they might have had on their hands. What does it tell you that they waited, the idea of being in a big theater?
I think that's really an interesting thing, John, because, you know, spending that much money on a movie, you're making a gigantic bet. And, you know, the movie going public had 2 years where they weren't going at all. And who knew when they would go back or if they'd go back. And yet they held off, they held off, and they held off, confident that they had a movie that would play in this big way. And they could have lost it all, but they risked it. And I think they must have believed in the product. And let's face it, this is a rare thing. When this has 96% on Rotten Tomatoes, the critics actually love this film. So it's pretty much got everything going for it.
I loved the 80s version. And so when I went in to watch this on Friday, I was prepared. My bar was high, but it really exceeded it. I mean, I thought it was better than the original. And I was really mad that they kept delaying it because, Bill, I wanted to watch it. I wanted to watch it years ago. I had it on my calendar to watch years ago. But they had all of these IMAX cameras in the actual planes that were flying. So if you'd released it on streaming or something, it would have been a waste, right?
Exactly. They would have wasted all of that effort. And, you know, they'd waited, what, more than 30 years to do this sequel. So they had to wait 2 more to get it in the theaters. And, you know, I think it paid off. And I think it sets a sort of a standard now. I mean, yeah, you do your sequels and all that, but make them really good. As you said, this is a better movie than the first movie. And really, the first movie, while it's thrilling to see, was kind of a cliched story. And I think they worked hard on the story. They had a lot of writers, gosh knows, but I think they really made a commitment, and that is why it stands out. I mean, it's not your regular action movie. It has a lot of, you know, independent value as a movie.
Like, to me,